A lot of people don't realize, oh, it's getting bedtime, I better start worrying about the night. Oftentimes, it's not a conscious choice, it's automatic. Why? Because our fight or flight defense mechanism has gotten triggered.
Okay, I think we can kick off. So welcome everyone to Zleep's first ever live masterclass. We're so excited to kick off this new series where we deep dive into the science of sleep and give you real practical tools to help you sleep better. Starting with the big one, which is nighttime overthinking. So let's be honest, how many times have we been so exhausted and just, gotten into bed and then suddenly our brains decide to, start replaying the most awkward scenes or spiral about tomorrow's to-do list or just life simply, right? So if that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Nighttime overthinking is one of the biggest reasons people struggle with sleep. And today we are here to unpack why this happens and most importantly, how to stop it. So, couldn't be more thrilled to have Dr. Derek Loewy with us here today. Derek, you've worked with people struggling with sleep for decades. And I know that nighttime overthinking is something you've seen a lot in your practice. So first, top of mind, what's the most common thing people tell you about their racing mind?
So I'm the psychologist in our sleep clinic, which means I get most of the insomnia cases directed my way. And these are people who have chronic difficulty falling asleep at night or staying asleep at night. And when they are awake in bed, unable to sleep, most of the time, they start getting up into their heads and they start thinking about tomorrow or yesterday or any variety of things. And their inability to manage their thoughts, either control them or redirect them, is one of the main reasons why they stay awake.
Thank you. Well, for those who are just joining, Derek Loewy is a board-certified sleep specialist and clinical psychologist with a PhD in behavioral sleep medicine. He's the director of the Insomnia Program and the Circadian Rhythm Sleep Disorder and Chronotherapy Program at the Scripps Clinic Sleep Center in California. He trained at some of the top sleep research centers, including Stanford, where Derek, you actually co-founded the Stanford Insomnia Program. So when it comes to sleep, I think there's really no better person to help us break this down. And beyond your clinical work, you've been deeply involved in shaping Zleep and the Zleep app. From the very beginning, your expertise has really helped us design really a science-backed digital-first approach to tackling insomnia, powered by AI. So one that isn't just about tracking sleep, but actually about helping people fix it. And quickly, for those who don't know me, I'm Tiffany, I'm the founder of Zleep, and I started this journey because, like so many of you, I've struggled with insomnia. And it wasn't until I discovered CBTI, so cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, that I finally saw a real change. And that's why I created Zleep, an AI-powered mobile app designed, again, not just to track sleep, but to actually help people fix it. So this is an interactive masterclass. If you have any question, comment, please don't hesitate to use the chat. We'll be taking some throughout the session. And yeah, so Derek, before we get into the actual techniques, how often do you see that being the main reason people struggle with sleep?
Often. So there are many reasons why people can't sleep at night. Insomnia is the most common sleep disorder, much more so than sleep apnea. And the most common cause of insomnia is stress. And there are a lot of things that people are stressing out about these days. And stress drives worry, and a worried mind doesn't sleep very well. Chronic stress can lead to chronic anxiety, which also doesn't lend itself well to sleeping. So it's a very common problem. In fact, I think the psychology of insomnia can be, more common than the physical aspects of it, in terms of physical complaints that can cause sleeplessness. So the psychology part of it is huge, and I think if we can find a way to, or ways rather, to better manage our thinking at night, it will help us manage to fall to sleep at bedtime and get back to sleep in the middle of the night much more effectively. Because sleep is essentially a physiological process, but the psychology can really interfere with that biological process, right?
Percent. But so why is it that, the minute our head hits the pillow that our mind tend to go into overdrive? Like what's actually happening neurologically? And yeah, and that makes the nighttime such a hotspot for overthinking.
Way to look at it is that, we're always mentally active. Like we're always thinking or processing information, even when we're not actively aware of it. So for example, right now we are engaged in this interaction. You and I are having a conversation, and there are other participants on the call. And so everybody is sort of paying attention to the content of what we're dealing with right now in this foreground. But all of the things all the worries we carry with us on a regular basis, they're all still there, right? But they're more in the background right now because we have fairly limited attention spans and we can't pay attention to everything that's on our minds all the time. We can focus on what's immediately in front of us, what we have to get done. So right now we're engaged in this interaction. But all of the worries that I carry around are still here, and as are yours and all of us. And so during the course of our waking day, when we're engaged in tasks that are very, front and center, foreground tasks, that's where our attention is. However, you can imagine if you transition from that context into a nighttime situation where now you're in a room that is quiet, dark, and you're awake, all those things that were in the background during the course of the day tend to move into foreground awareness, because really there's nothing to direct our attention toward in that context, in that quiet, dark room. Now, if you're a good sleeper, that's fine. Those are really good environmental conditions for sleep for most of us. But if you struggle with difficulty sleeping at bedtime, you put yourself in that context, and that's a very jarring transition from a waking space where you're engaged in doing things, and you move into the quiet space where it's dark and quiet. There's no obvious foreground activity, so all the worries come to the front, and they start spinning. And they can move through, sequentially. We can go from one topic to the next, or we can perseverate on one specific topic or worry, And if you're worrying about not sleeping, now you're worrying about that. And so all the things that you were worrying about generally are there, plus there's just the problem of sleep in general. And I have many people who say, well, I'm not worried about anything in particular. I'm not stressed out. I'm just lying there wondering when I'm going to fall asleep. And so they're paying attention to that. And that hypervigilance of paying attention to your state of alertness versus sleepiness will keep you awake. So there are lots of things about attention, really is where it's at night, that will either keep us awake, or if we can manage attention better, will help us fall asleep more effectively.
I see. So there's also this frustrating loop. I think that a lot of people get stuck in, right? I don't know, overthinking activates them, keep them up, and then the lack of sleep fuels that insomnia even more. So can you maybe help us break down this loop and maybe how to break that cycle?
Sure. So, the loop is, let's take, for example, someone who is having a hard time sleeping, which would be the reason I'd be seeing them anyway. So here we have an individual for whom sleep is a challenge, and it has been for a long time. And so this is something that is of concern. Why? Because sleep is important. It sets the table for how we function during our waking lives. So the stakes are fairly high. And if you already have a little bit of doubt, worry, trepidation about how the night's going to go, as soon as you start approaching that time where it's bedtime, the anxiety about how the night's going to go starts to automatically build. And it's not necessarily a conscious choice. A lot of people don't realize, oh, it's getting bedtime, I better start worrying about the night. Oftentimes it's not a conscious choice, it's automatic. Why? Because our fight or flight defense mechanism has gotten triggered, because over a persistent period of time, sleep has been a struggle. And so it's rather unpleasant and distressing not to sleep well. And so our fight or flight system gets a little bit triggered, and now we put ourselves in what could be ideal sleep conditions. You could be doing great sleep hygiene. You could have the best bedroom in the world. It's quiet, it's dark, it's comfortable, it's got all the things. But if you put yourself in that pristine sleep environment, but you are still in your head about whether or not you're going to fall asleep, you'll probably not be successful. This is often why sleep hygiene is insufficient, because it doesn't deal with the mental state. So here you have someone who's already worried about the night. They are now in that zone where they're hoping to sleep. And there is one general truism about insomnia, and that is the more you worry about not sleeping, the less you will sleep. Moreover, the more you try to sleep, the less you will sleep. That's this paradox. This is the vicious cycle. You worry about whether or not you'll sleep. That gets in the way of sleeping well. You have another bad night. The next night you go to bed with just a little bit more worry because last night didn't go well. And now you're thinking, well, I really hope tonight is good because I got to catch up. Or tonight I'll probably sleep well because I didn't sleep well last night. But you're going to bed wondering about it, and you have another bad night, more worry, more insomnia, and on and on. And that's the vicious cycle of the whole thing. By contrast, people who sleep well, they're not going to bed wondering how it's going to go. They're not thinking, gee, I hope I sleep tonight. For them, it's automatic. It's expected. So they go to bed, they put themselves in this ideal sleep space. They're not trying to fall asleep. They're not even thinking about it. It happens automatically. So my goal is to try to get my insomnia patients to be more like that, to be able to approach bedtime not having it on top of mind, that they are doing something other with their attention, because the vicious cycle of insomnia is worry about not sleep, leads to not sleeping, leads to more worry about not sleeping, and on and on and on. And it's a very tight, vicious cycle that gets established over time.
So would you say that basically we start assimilating eventually the bed with being awake, and activated unconsciously, like automatically?
Yes. So we are very susceptible to conditioning. We can be conditioned in positive ways or negative ways. And chronic insomnia can lead to a negative form of conditioning, meaning that the attempt at sleep results in failure. Therefore, the attempt becomes associated with or paired with not sleeping. And over time, what we want to have happen is the opposite, obviously, right? But the more the attempt is paired with a bad outcome, the more the attempt and the bad outcome become increasingly reinforced or conditioned. And I have many people who say, it's really frustrating. It's the evening, I'm doing something relaxing, I'm trying to stay awake to watch a TV show or whatever, and I feel really sleepy. And there's a little bit of optimism that kind of creeps in there. And so you transition from that room, the awake room, and you move down the hall or upstairs and you go to the sleep room. What happens during that transition? Your fight or flight system is getting activated. On some level, your nervous system realizes, we've made that decision again to try this thing called sleep. And the anxiety starts to build, and you get into the bedroom, and boom, that sleepiness you felt 5 minutes ago is gone. It had nothing to do with the fact that you had to walk. That's all that woke you up. What woke you up is the choice you made to try to go to bed. So here we have a situation where the awake room is paired now with sleepiness when you're trying to be awake, and the sleep room, the bedroom, is now paired with wakefulness when you're trying to sleep. So the wires are crossed. So we have to uncondition this one and get the wires uncrossed. Living room awake, bedroom sleepy. And there's a protocol for doing that.
Well, there's actually a couple of questions about that and how to break that cycle, but I guess we're going to touch upon this pretty soon. But first, when people can't sleep because of those racing thoughts, what kinds of thought patterns do you see coming up repeatedly? And again, how can we probably fix that?
Well, the kinds of thoughts that come up in those moments vary a lot from person to person. For example, if the person's having chronic difficulty sleeping and it's having an impact on their life, their job, their performance, they're really worried about how tomorrow's going to go. If I don't sleep tonight, tomorrow's not going to be a great night. So that right there adds more pressure. Now the stakes are even higher because you've told yourself the story that the next day hangs in the balance with how the night goes. That's a recipe for not doing well. I have people who are reflecting on the previous day. They're not forward looking, they're backward looking. Gee, I wish I had done things differently today. That's the coulda, shoulda, woulda kind of thinking, a lot of regret,
Replaying.
rumination. Then there are people who are dealing with a lot of major stressors in their life. It could be financial, it could be health, concerns about family, now concerns of the world. I mean, there's all kinds of things to worry about. And then there's just people who say, you know what, I just can't turn off my mind. It's just random thoughts. My mind just jumps from topic to topic, and none of these things are particularly consequential, but I can't seem to turn it off. So it comes in different forms. And then when I go through the list with some patients, they say, all of that. Yeah, all of those things.
So could you maybe take us through how to actually uh, fix those in each of these use cases? Like, do you have any type of tips to help in each of these use cases?
Yeah, I've been spending a lot of time working on this because it's such a pervasive problem. And when I first started addressing it, I had a variety of things. I would say, okay, well, if you go to bed, read a book, do something to kind of distract yourself. And I still think distraction is a very powerful approach to this. However, you can break it down in a more detailed fashion. For example, if what's keeping people awake at night are the practical things, the to-dos, these are the things I got to get done. And I have a lot of people like that. They're a little bit type A, and they're a little bit worried about missing something. And so they're list makers, right? And they'll even make the lists in bed, which is fine. That's fine. But for them, I say, look, instead of waiting until you get to the space where you're in this dark, quiet room to start making your lists and doing your to-do thinking, spend some time in the evening before bed. Reserve a block of time. Now, and not just watch it while you're watching TV. Like, sit quietly somewhere by yourself and give some thought to what you got to get done tomorrow or the day after, whatever time horizon is of consequence to you. But sit down and really give some thought energy to these tasks. Write them down, have a plan, make a list of what you got to get done and when. And so if you catch yourself later in bed and these thoughts start to rise up again, you can tell yourself with some authority, well, I've kind of spent some time on that. I think I've mostly got it. It's much easier to set it aside that way. And if something pops up that you hadn't thought about, you jot that down. But try to take care of a lot of that planning before you go to bed. Now,
So
if
kind of
you do,
scheduling some time,
yeah,
like
yeah,
some
it goes
worry
by different
time.
names. At Stanford, we called it scheduled worry time. So schedule your worries. Be proactive with your worries. Don't let your worries ambush you in bed when you don't want to deal with them, right? You ride out and meet them in the field before they come pounding on your gate. So you deal with those beforehand. I call it the daily download, which was actually a term that a patient gave to me. And the daily download is a combination of process the day that was, all the stuff you got done, a little bit of, attaboy, attagirl stuff, the stuff you didn't get done, and then do a preview of tomorrow. Do a mental walkthrough of the day. Start with the morning. What are the tasks I need to get done? What are the things I'd like to get done? And you move through it. So you've done a little bit of reconnaissance on the next day. So if you're lying in bed, it's not fresh, in your mind. So that's a very practical strategy. Now, there are a lot of things people worry about that they can't really control, right? It's beyond their control. These are the harder ones in a way because what am I supposed to do with this? You're lying in bed. I can't do anything about that. This is where I think we have to invoke the idea of attention. So,
Could you maybe give us an example just to have an idea of?
yeah. So, first off, if you get nothing else from this webinar other than this is the key pearl of the whole thing. Your attention, what you're paying attention to is the hack, no matter what is on your mind. Because we do have a modicum of control about what we decide to think about in a given moment. Now, it's hard to hold on to it because it's very easy to fall back into automatic thinking about this, that, and the other thing. But whenever you notice it happening, because usually it's already happening before you catch yourself. It's like, I'm doing that thing again. I got to stop doing this. Okay, as soon as you notice it, that's an opportunity. Why? Because the noticer can make a different choice. The noticer can say, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm going to direct my attention over here. Now, the over here is the key. What are the over here things? And I have ideas about that, and I'll tell you about it in a second. But as I said, the whole thing is attention. What are you paying attention to? You do not have to be on autopilot. You can bring your attention and your thoughts to an area or topic of your choosing. Now, again, it's hard to hold it, because people might say, well, think of a happy place, like you're on a beach somewhere and you can hear the surf and the breeze. That's wonderful. I can do that for maybe 15 seconds, and then I'm right back in my head. So you need to have something that's going to be more engaging than just that. But think of your attention like a muscle, right? You have to keep exercising it, strengthening it. Pull away from the thinking, pull away from the thinking. Just keep redirecting thoughts elsewhere. You will get better at it the more you do it. So an example of a distraction, the oldest one in the book is a book. Go figure. Do some reading, preferably not on a screen. Why? Because now we have light hitting the eyes, and that's a problem for other reasons. But reading a book. But it has to be a book that you are actually into. It's not just looking at the page, the lines on the page going back and forth, all the while having the same thought in your head. You have to be something engaging. Audio is good. There are audio books available. There are apps, so you can listen to something in bed. I like that better than books in a way because it's much more passive, right? You can lie in the dark, quiet space without having to deal with a light or a book. You're just listening to a story, and something coming in the ear, an input into the ear, is usually going to pull our attention away, and it's a great way to disrupt the internal chatter. So that's another option. There are a variety of little mental tricks you can do as well. But the idea is to bring your attention to something else that is engaging, such that you can actually stay with it for maybe 5-10 minutes. That's all it takes. But it's not in itself overly stimulating. So, don't go load up work emails or the news feed. In fact, never listen to the news again. But do something very benign, but as also somewhat engaging, and practice holding your attention there.
Okay. No, very, very interesting tips. What about, the very common one as well, which is actually thinking about sleep, right?
Right. So, like I said earlier, there are situations where someone says, life is great. I have no worries at all. I'm thinking to myself, that's good. That's awesome. I wish I had that. But when my life is great, I have no stress. I'm just wonderful. But when I get into bed, I can't help but think about whether or not I'm going to fall asleep. And that's sort of the overthinking in its purest form. It's like, I'm not thinking about stuff. I'm thinking about one thing, that I'm not asleep yet, right? So here you have someone who's sitting there waiting. Am I sleepy yet? I got drowsy there. No, I lost it. And so the more you're waiting for sleep to show up, the more you're actually keeping it at bay. Why? Because that paying attention is a form of vigilance. It's activating. You're not really letting yourself go into the experience of sleep. You're on guard. And being on guard requires vigilance and attention. Like if you're a sentry at night, you're on guard. So you need to stay awake to be on guard. So the paradox is you're keeping yourself awake because you're waiting for sleep to show up.
And you get activated and so on. So what I hear is that a lot of people, what I've been hearing a lot is that a lot of people put a lot of pressure to get that perfect night of sleep, right? And how does that kind of thinking backfires at the end, just to get that perfect night of sleep? And what type of, what are some healthier expectations we should aim for instead?
Sorry, say the last part again.
How can we change those expectations basically and have healthier type of expectations?
Okay, so the problem of insomnia, the reason it's a problem and the reason people come to see me for help or do apps or seek help is because it's not okay, right? We all have the occasional bad night, and we sort of chalk that up to, well, I was sick or I was stressed or, the neighbor's dog was barking, and we don't get too hung up on that. We can let those slide. But when you've noticed that your problem with sleep is starting to become persistent, over time. And there's no way to obviously point to an external factor. That's when you start to wonder, geez, so it's not this, this, or this. It must be me. There's something wrong with me. I don't know how to do this anymore. I used to be able to do this, and I've lost it. So that fear is another driver, right? You've lost confidence in your ability to sleep at night. And the less confident you are, the more anxious you are. And the more anxious you are, the less you'll sleep. So we can tell ourselves stories about, I used to be able to do this, now I can't, or I've done everything and nothing seems to work. There can be a certain degree of sort of hopelessness, catastrophization that kind of creeps in. And really none of it's true. I mean, it is in a way because, yeah, you have tried things. Here's the thing. We're all sleepers at core. This is an out-of-the-box behavior for humans and all mammals, right? Something we're supposed to do. So I always try to reassure my patients. I say, look, you can sleep. You may not be a super sleeper, but you can sleep. We have to find a way to kind of access that potential that you have, right? So I try to lower the bar of expectations a little bit. We're not trying to make everybody perfect sleepers, awesome sleepers, great sleepers. And that's the thing too. A lot of my patients who've had this for a long time, they've come to idealize what it is to sleep normally. Well, normal sleepers sleep 8 hours and they never wake up and they feel refreshed in the morning and great. I don't know anybody like that. I mean, maybe they exist, but I never see them in clinic. But I have a lot of people who are, let's say, non-complaining sleepers. Like, they're not seeking help. They're doing fine. And their sleep is highly imperfect. They do take a bit of time to fall asleep at night. They do wake up at night. They don't always feel great in the morning. But they're not seeking help for it. And part of it is understanding what is normal sleep. So the first thing I point to is, look, we're aiming for normal. We're not aiming for perfect. There are going to be blemishes in there, but it's part of the deal. The other thing, too, is that the belief that, your life hangs in the balance on how you sleep on a given night, that's an exaggeration, too. Most of my patients have had this problem for a long time, and they still show up at work. It's not perfect, but they still show up. They still manage their lives. This isn't a lingering problem for them, but it's not like the world is falling apart. And it's very easy to get into this perception of problems as being overly negative, because what we see is all we see are the things that are not going well, and we forget to see what is going.
Negative bias, basically.
Yeah, it's a bias. It's a negative bias. And so part of it is asking the person, so, what is it what are you worried about here? What's the problem? And I'm not trying to talk them out of their concerns. I'm not trying to paint a rosier picture than is true. I'm just trying to help them move along this continuum between hyper-negativity and hyper-optimism to sort of a middle space, right? It's like everything in life. There's a middle path. And so a lot of my patients who are very anxious about their sleep are skewing negatively in terms of their thinking about the problem. So I'm just trying to bring them back to a middle place. And as soon as I can get them here and they feel that much less anxious, guess what? They'll have a better night because they can actually, okay. I mean, countless times, the first return visit with a patient, they come back and they say, when you told me that people wake up in the middle of the night, I didn't know that. Well, it's true. We do. We're all predisposed to waking up a little bit every couple of hours because these sleep cycle transitions result in brief arousals from sleep. And I've had people say, it's the weirdest thing. I wake up every 2 hours. I can almost predict it. It's I know what that is. That's the normal architecture of sleep.
But a lot of people don't even notice it.
Yeah, right. Good sleepers wake up too, but they roll over. They don't care. But if you are hypersensitive to sleep problems and you wake up in the night, it's not like, oh, whatever. It's like, oh no, what does this mean? I just woke up. Why did I wake up? When am I going back to sleep? What does this mean for tomorrow? Should I take a sleeping pill? Should I take a sleeping pill? I don't want to take a sleeping pill, but I should take a sleeping pill. So all of that thinking that results from an otherwise fairly normal arousal from sleep, if you start getting into your head about the what ifs, Now you're keeping yourself awake. And that hyper analysis that can happen, that can become a conditioned pattern over time too. Most of the people I see who have a problem with waking up in the middle of the night, first of all, you wake up at 3. It's always 3. Between 2 and 4, but usually 3. Why? Because that's a thing. That's actually a thing. So if you're under current stress and you come up from sleep in the middle of the night around 3, and as soon as you become aware that you're awake, the reality of your life kind of snaps into awareness, like, right, all of that. And any kind of mental energy or dwelling on those topics, that's going to keep you awake. And then you can fast forward years ahead, and the problem that the person was dealing with that time is gone, long gone. Life is great, but I still wake up in the middle of the night. I can't go back to sleep because your brain has learned as a result of that experience that that's when we think about stuff. That's when we worry about stuff. It's an automatic sort of residual from the past. But if it's a conditioned phenomenon, you can uncondition it, right? And that's where cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia could be very valuable, right? Especially the cognitive part.
Well, you've touched upon our next topic, which is great. So, basically, could you maybe share with us some techniques, whether they're behavioral or cognitive, into how to,
Sure.
shut off the mind
Sure.
in that moment?
Okay, well, let's start with the behavioral part first, because as the name cognitive behavioral therapy implies, there are 2 elements, cognitive behavioral. The behavioral stuff is very concrete. So this is where sleep hygiene lands, right? So there are things we can do that give ourselves a better chance to sleep at night. Do more of those. There are things we can do that make sleep worse. Do less of those. I'm not going to get into that right now because it's sort of off topic. But the behavioral stuff is more about sleep hygiene, sleep schedules, how to manage your behavior at night and during the day to give yourself the best chance to sleep at night. The cognitive part is more along the lines of our topic today, which deals with how is the person thinking about the problem. So cognitive therapy comes from psychology. It's been around for a long time, but the idea is there are ways in which a person might be thinking about the problem that is actually making the problem worse. And this is really true for insomnia. The more you worry about not sleeping, the less you will sleep. In a nutshell, that's it. Now, we can build on that, but that's the core element, right? So the first thing is, as I said, set up expectations. We're aiming for normal, not perfect. It's okay to wake up. Don't freak out. Nothing bad's happening to you. Right away, that's very powerful. People come back immediately the next time and say, wow, that was the best thing I've ever heard. It's okay to wake up at night. I'm so much less bothered by it now. And guess what? They're going back to sleep faster because they're not telling themselves stories about how abnormal it is and all the bad things are going to happen. Well, I'm going to get cancer. I'm going to die young or get dementia. I mean, there's research that suggests that sleep's important for health, and we know that. But don't get caught up, in the moment by moment worry about that, because that's problematic. Anyway, so try to normalize expectations. It goes a long way towards managing the worry about not sleeping. But in the moment, I think it's more about this attention hack I was alluding to earlier. So if what you're trying to do is get out of your head, I think what you want to do is have what I call a transitional activity. So when you go to bed, because classic sleep hygiene says that, thou shalt not in bed other than have sleep or sex, right? So that's what you're supposed to do, which is fine. And that's based on that conditioning theory, which is legit. However, there are things we do in bed that don't involve sleeping or having sex. It's called being awake. And if you're an anxious person, that is very unpleasant and that is very difficult to manage. So I think it's okay to have a non-sleep activity in bed to sort of create a bridge between waking consciousness and sleep. Because I think the transition from the wake environment to the sleep environment for an anxious person can be very abrupt. So you bring something to bed with you. Have an audio going, a podcast, nothing too interesting, or an audiobook, so that your attention is not on the sleep problem. I always tell people, if you're waiting for sleep to show up, it's not going to show up. Just like that saying, a watched pot never boils, you know.
But would, just to bring the devil's advocate, would eventually then, would we create that conditioning where we will be only able to fall asleep with that audio that we bring to bed? Or is that something we can eventually break after?
You can break out of it eventually. I think it serves as a bridge to short-term success. Because in the short term, people are desperate. And I feel like taking a book to bed with you for a year is better than taking Ambien for a year. You know what I mean? Like, it's all relative. There's a cost-benefit analysis in all of this. But if you can get to a point where by reading in bed for a year has got to a point where your sleep confidence is back, well, then you can start titrating back the reading and see if you can still do it. It's not too dissimilar from the medication strategy. I mean, I'm a psychologist. I don't prescribe pills. I try to help people with this CBTI approach. But this is the long game. Like, if I have someone sitting in front of me and they are going to the ER multiple times because they can't sleep and their anxiety is off the hook, I can tell them about CBTI, but they can't hear it because they need to sleep now. And so these are situations where we will recommend a sleep medication. But I've had many people say, I don't want to take pills under any circumstance. I'm like, okay, well, you've got a tough choice here. And I tell them, look, if you break your ankle, you're going to be in a boot or a cast for 6 weeks. Why? Because you can't keep walking on your ankle. It's not going to heal and you can't function. But the purpose of the cast or the boot is to allow the ankle to heal. And then once you get signs that it's healing, we take the boot off and see if you can walk. Well, think of your sleep medication as a cast for your sleep. Your sleep is broken right now. You can't do it naturally. We have to let it heal. So we recommend a short-term sleep aid that, by and large is safe, not habit-forming. Those exist. Not a lot of them, but they exist. So to help heal your sleep. And then once they have their medication, we can do the CBTI piece along the way. And I can help them learn about how to manage their thoughts at night. Because when you are spinning in panic, all this stuff we're talking about how to redirect your attention, forget it. Try to tell someone who's having a panic attack, well, change how you're thinking. Right? So there are extremes where, everything we're talking about today, I think has a lot of merit. But there are extreme edge cases where it's like, okay, we have to do something else to kind of stabilize the situation. And so going back to your question, a transitional activity like reading or a podcast or some kind of meditation at bedtime, so you become dependent on it for a while. Okay. Worst things can happen.
100%. Indeed. Okay. Well, conscious of time, I'm just going to go through the questions in the chat. So most of them, I think, have been answered. If you feel that they haven't been answered, please repost your questions. There is one here from Thea that says, sometimes even during the day, my mind decides that I won't have the best night of sleep. So even during the day. How can I pull away from these thoughts during the day?
Okay. That's common too. So it's not just worry that starts to show up around bedtime. I have people who carry that worry with them all through the day. And I think that it's an example of how extreme it can get. And I think during the day, I'm assuming that there are other things that have to get done. So maybe there's work or school or something's happening. So, you just have to be in the moment. So just stop and say, okay, the nighttime hasn't shown up yet. I don't even have to deal with that right now. What I have to deal with is what's in front of me, which is a work task or something else. So try to slow everything down. Don't get into what'll happen tonight? That forward thinking about something that hasn't even arrived yet is not only probably unnecessary worry, but it's distracting from your ability to focus on what you're currently doing. So try to shorten the awareness into the moment. It's kind of a mindfulness strategy. If you catch yourself thinking about the night, just pause and go, wait a minute, that hasn't even happened yet. I'm here right now. What can I do right now that is either productive or relaxing that will help me be okay in the moment? And then it is a practice, and it's moment by moment moving through the day. But if we can get to a point where the sleep starts to turn around at night, a few more, successful nights, that daytime anxiety will go away automatically. because the reason it's there is because there's anticipation of failure about sleep. It's almost expected. And that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy in and of itself. But if you start to get benefit from sleep through whatever means is working for you, the daytime thing will go away automatically because there's nothing more to worry about. But some people are just anxious generally, and so that might require additional intervention, for the anxiety. It's not even about sleep per se.
Okay, last question. Thank you so much for answering that. So we have Chloe asking, is there a reason that it's easier for some people to approach sleep without worrying, and others, such as myself and others on this call, are more susceptible to these type of insomnia? Is this the continued insomnia problem generally event triggered, or is it sometimes specific to that individual makeup? As an example, you mentioned being a type A person.
That's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there. Yeah, that's
Well,
a really good question because it does
quickly.
kind of touch on all these different elements. First of all, some people are just better sleepers than others. It's just how we're made up, right? Some people come into the world and sleep is just their strength, and it always has been. Other people come into the world, I've never been a good sleeper. I've just gotten by with enough, you know what I mean? So we're all different in that respect. So it's very hard to make comparisons to other people. 2/3 of my patients sleep beside someone who sleeps great. So, and they compare themselves to that person. Like, I should be like that person. Well, no, you're different. So people are different in terms of their ability for sleep, but everybody can sleep to some degree. The situational part, obviously as I said earlier, stress is the major driver of insomnia. And I think even good sleepers will have bad nights occasionally under conditions of stress. So it can be event related. And that's kind of transient. That kind of comes and goes. I think the personality piece, though, is highly relevant. Type A individuals are highly susceptible to insomnia because here you have someone who is human and is going to have a bad night here and there, but they also have a mindset or a style such that perfectionists feel like anything is solvable with enough cleverness and effort. Like, if I'm smart enough and I apply myself sufficiently, I can accomplish anything. And that's awesome. I wish I had that. But that's true 95% of the time. There's a small subset of things, though, that doesn't work for. Sleep is one of them. Sleep doesn't care how smart you are, and it's going to fight back the harder you try. So it does not just get better, it gets worse. And that makes perfectionists more anxious and make them try harder. And they dig a deeper hole, and they get into this thing. Those are the people that say my life is great because they have all their stuff figured out, but their sleep is driving them crazy because they can't solve it. And so, but they're doing everything. They've read the books, they've done the podcasts, they've got the pillow, the mattress, the eye mask, the lavender scented pillow. They've done everything, and it's still not working. It makes them crazy because they almost get resentful. I've done everything I was supposed to do. That's exactly what they said in the book. Where's my sleep? That person's not sleeping because, did you see my face there? You know what I mean? Like, you have to let go. That's the thing about sleep. Here's another pearl. We don't go to sleep. No one goes to sleep. We fall asleep.
Yeah.
Sleep is a reaction. Sleep goes to us.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. You sort of have to recognize your limits of what you can control. And you step back and say, okay, I can't make this happen. I just have to be okay with what is. And if you can find a way to be okay with what is, which is I'm awake at night, I'd rather be sleeping, but truly okay and not fighting, that's when sleep comes.
Yeah. Well, I guess this comes with practice and hearing that idea.
A lot of practice.
Over
Yeah, it's
and
not
over
easy.
again.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing. Well, this is our masterclass coming to an end. Thank you all for joining here today. We've covered a lot, definitely. And thank you, Derek, also for joining us today. If you're struggling, know that you're not alone. I think here we are definitely proof that there's a lot of people struggling with that. And sometimes it just needs the right nudge, as you're trying to share right now. This is what we're here for. And if you haven't already tried the app, download it and give it a try and tell us what you think. And hoping you all get a good night's sleep tonight. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any question. And thank you so much. And until next time, bye everyone.